He knocked me over. I landed on the dog bowl.
This one's wife. Harry, you should be very worried indeed. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. What is it that Harry should be very worried indeed about? The fact that he's married to a narcissist that has been treating him to a sustained devaluation, albeit recently he has been in the respite period, leaving him to scratch his head as to why she's being so handsy and affectionate when she's not been intimate with him in months? Well, indeed, that would be something that should cause him to be particularly concerned as a consequence of who has ensnared him. But it isn't actually that. Might it be the fact that his ginger rug is thinning to quite a degree now, particularly on top? Well, that might be an issue for some people, but it doesn't appear to be too much of a concern for him. After all, he doesn't really bother sporting a smart haircut, does he? Looks a right scruff bag these days. No, there are many things that Harry ought to be concerned about, and in this video, it provides me the opportunity to demonstrate a variety of different aspects in respect of the impact of narcissism on the world of Prince Harry. It relates to President Trump. You'll recall that hitherto President Trump has suggested that he wasn't going to deport the Prince of Pink Pancakes as a consequence that basically Harry's experiencing punishment enough with his terrible wife. I've analysed President Trump previously and explained that he too is a narcissist and that he's of the upper lesser type B variety, which means that he's bold, brash and belligerent. His narcissism means that often he's rather effective in respect of driving things through, but it's somewhat of a wrecking ball approach. If you like what he does, you'll see him as hugely effective. If you don't, you will see him as a terrible individual. Now, it's not for me to tell you what your view of Trump ought to be. I'm simply telling you what he is, and you can make your own determination about that, even though there are some people who regularly fail to understand that. Please, try not to be so hard of understanding. One thing that is important to understand about the narcissist, whereby the narcissist always operates in the moment. This is particularly all-consuming for the lesser and mid-range narcissists, because they don't consider what's gone before or what might happen unless it directly links to the now. The greater narcissists and the ultra do have a greater regard to collateral consequences, which means they are far more effective. But the bulk of narcissists, 99.9% of narcissists on the planet, are lesser and mid-range, which means that their narcissism causes them to look at the moment in order to get to the prime aims and devil the consequences, because they can be dealt with later. This means that in effect, the narcissist operates in a transactional fashion. What's good for them now is what it's all about, and that can change in a minute's time, or a day's time, or a week, or a month's time. It's also the fact of the narcissist conditional asterisk. Want to know what that is? Watch the video. In essence, it means that the narcissist is never consistent with regard to a course of action, because all that matters is the pursuit of the prime aims. And if gaining controls means being a hypocrite, then so be it. If drawing fuel means engaging in contradictory behaviours, that doesn't matter. Because the narcissism shields the narcissist from understanding that they're being a hypocrite or a contrarian. It tells them that they are being consistent. It blinds them to the evidence of contradictory and inconsistent behaviour to ensure that the narcissist goes after the prime aims. And we've got a brilliant example of this in respect of Donald Trump. As the Mail reports, Donald Trump remains committed to Prince Harry facing a criminal prosecution if he is found to have lied about his drugs use in his visa application. Accordingly, previously, he basically said not going to really do anything about it, not going to deport him because of his terrible wife. But now, Trump is vowing transparency and will back legal action. Anyone lying about drug use on a US visa application faces up to 5 years in prison, a fine, or deportation. as the Mail reports. In his 2023 memoir, Spare, Harry admitted using cocaine, marijuana, and magic mushrooms. He's also admitted drug use, of course, in other circumstances, interviews, for example. If he had admitted that when arriving in the US in 2022, he would have needed a visa waiver after interview. Washington think tank, the Heritage Foundation, has been fighting to have Department of Homeland Security data released to discover if Harry told the truth and whether he got special treatment. Judge Carl Nichols had initially ruled all documents should be kept private. But in documents filed on Thursday, he ordered details of a secret in-camera meeting last summer between himself and lawyers for the DHS to be turned over to the Heritage Foundation. A source said, President Trump has made it very clear that if Harry is found to have not told the truth on his visa application, then he could face prosecution. If Harry answered the drugs questions truthfully, that would have triggered a visa waiver process, whereby he would have been interviewed and given a waiver. If that is the case, the public has a right to know. Trump has said he won't deport Harry, but there's no doubt he would support a prosecution, which of course could lead to deportation. What is interesting is the judge admitted holding a secret meeting with lawyers for the government without telling lawyers representing Heritage. That is highly unusual, if not unprecedented. It is highly pertinent the judge has admitted Heritage has a right to see the non-public documents. The source explained that Harry is far from off the hook, adding, the word in Washington is that he should be very worried indeed. There is no love lost between the Sussexes and President Trump. Accordingly, this will not go away for Harry, and in the circumstances, Trump is backing a prosecution of him, and the issue as to what's gone on in respect of this visa will not evaporate and disappear in the way that the Sussexes would prefer. As I've explained to you previously, this is hugely pertinent to how this one's wife would regard Harry, because if he were to face a prosecution which resulted in deportation or being sent to prison, although those outcomes do seem unlikely given the fact that there may well be a desire not to upset King Charles, because Trump is an admirer of the royal family, save for Prince Harry and this one's wife. But if it were to occur, that very much would drive a stake through the relationship between Harry and this one's wife. This would be because he would be disgraced, which means that her character trait acquisition of him would be tainted. It would mean that unless she goes with him, in the case of deportation, and obviously she can't if he was imprisoned, that would impact upon his fuel position as the intimate fuel provision as the intimate partner primary source. If he were deported, it might mean that he'd have to return to the United Kingdom, which is hugely problematic for this one's wife. Accordingly, it's a concern for Harry because he could face prosecution, which could result in deportation, which could result in imprisonment, which could result in a fine, and would result in disgrace. This would further taint the Sussexes, meaning that many people would want to distance themselves from them. This has already happened to a considerable extent, but it would become even more pronounced, as people wouldn't want to be associated with someone that had been convicted in this way. It would lead to potential problems with regard to this one's wife concerning his role within her fuel matrix, which could trigger disengagement. So, in a peculiar way, there'd actually be a silver lining for Harry that this one's wife would get rid of him. It may also, of course, tie in with the accusations that they have been utilising federal funds in a way that they ought not to have done. And these various fronts that are opening up are certainly an unwelcome distraction for this one's wife, because with Harry being an extension of her, they threaten her control as well. Harry ought to be very worried, and it's highly likely that there will be somebody tasering those pink pods, pointing out this exposure and coverage, and how, of course, it is set to foil the endeavours and dreams of this one's wife. It's something to keep a careful eye on in relation to what happens with this visa application and also the allegations about their misuse of funds. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.